I will turn on my mic. Oh, I have a nice live mic. Whoa. Hot mic tonight. I will call the meeting to order at 6:30 and
Hello.
Had problems getting into the parking lot tonight.
wow, there's things going on tonight. A lot of
Well, I was
activity
over
here.
at the Representatives' town hall meeting over in Maplewood for a little bit too. Leon Lilly and our local senators and all that.
So,
Everything's going on tonight.
is Ms. Howe, can you do a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Rothi,
Here.
Commissioner Muick,
Here?
Commissioner Gadboy, Commissioner Kane Burback.
Here.
Commissioner Alvarez is excused tonight. Commissioner Weiss
Here.
and Chair Blees
Here.
and Council Liaison Nordby.
Here.
And also, I am present.
That's good, since you were speaking. With that, we have a pretty simple agenda tonight. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as written, or if anyone has any comments of something else?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Moved by Wise, seconded by Rothi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have an agenda. Approval of meeting minutes from January 4th. We did not have a meeting in February, so. Does anyone have any comments on the meeting minutes from the last 2 months ago meeting?
I did in the last paragraph, the last sentence in the first paragraph, it said that the houses would run in the $100,000 range. I believe he said $400,000.
I wondered about that,
Yeah.
but I don't know what the right answer is.
It wasn't 100,000.
Wasn't 100,000.
No.
I also remember 400,000 range.
Yeah.
It's possible that it was difficult to hear on a recording, too.
Yep, I will make a note of that for
Yeah.
Chris.
Anything else? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adopt meeting minutes with the revision mentioned.
Just to interrupt for a second, speaking of the recording quality, I was listening to the Art Commission last night, and I don't know if it was the individuals or if it's just the folks on this side that I was having a hard time hearing. I don't know if it's because of the mic but maybe just make sure it's nice and close to your face.
Take advantage of that hot mic. So, entertain a motion to adopt meeting minutes as written with the minor modification that was mentioned.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Rothi, second.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Weiss. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have no nays. See, we're going to cruise through this agenda. You know, I can't say, though, that it will be a record short meeting because last month we didn't have a meeting. That was the record short meeting.
You're funny.
Well, I don't know, if you don't have a meeting, can it be regarded as a meeting?
No, I guess it can't. The meeting is open to the public. Do we have anyone on Zoom that may want to make a statement on a topic other than what's on the agenda?
Oh, we do not.
Okay, in that case, we will proceed. We will proceed to, I think, our main business item. Yes, our main business item is to have a workshop about fence regulations. So, for all those in the public who are, looking for something really interesting tonight, they should be online listening to us.
This is the bread and butter of my profession.
Can you begin by presenting your information to us?
Sure, I would be happy to. So I think everybody has access to either a digital copy or a hard copy of the staff report that has the proposed amendments in it, as well as the explanation as to the explanation as to why the amendment is proposed as it is. I've tried a different format from previous meetings, so let me know if this is something that you appreciate or if you'd like me to change how we present things. But as far as the fence regulations go, the system I utilized was to break it down by section. So I went through the ordinance and found within the definitions part of the zoning ordinance everything that had to deal with fences, and I put them in section 1 in this table. The fence regulations are in section 2. Non-encroachment issues are in section 3. The regulations that speak to fences I included in section 4. And architectural requirements related to fences are in 5, and screening standards and parking standards are in 6 and 7. So on the right-hand side, I added commentary about where our fence regulations might need to be adjusted and why, and just some other food for thought. So I'd really just like to open up the floor to any discussion, assuming that everybody's had a chance to go through this. If you would like more of a description of the staff report, I could provide that too.
So you make mention in section 5 and 6, by the way, I like the format. Section 5, 6, and 7, at least, you make mention to referencing the fence regs. Cross-reference fence regs, it says, which would be referencing section 2, correct?
Yes, that's what I meant by that.
Okay. Are these sections specifically related to, so you've just snipped pieces of those sections of the ordinance as it's written to find the fence components, and then that's the same, the extended version, the proposed revised version is what follows, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I really like the format as well, too. It's very easy to, go through piece by piece, and then your commentary is really helpful, too, on the right side. I agree with what you said about the 4-foot high fence in the front yard, which makes sense, rather than making somebody get some sort of bespoke 3.5-foot fence that can just buy a 4-foot one. I was reading some of, other towns' fence standards, and it looks like usually it's 7 feet for the rest of the yard, but I mean, I don't know if that's another retail available size sort of thing, or if 6.5 feet works. I mean, I'd be fine either way. I just seemed like 7 feet was the one I saw more often than not, but the one I was just curious about is the fact that as it's written now, fences are not allowed in non-residential districts.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you have any background as to why that would have been in there, what the thought process is?
I can speculate, and I think that it may have had to do with, and maybe some of you have been around long enough to, I don't think, as I'm looking at you, the downtown design guidelines. So around 2015, we updated the whole code to implement the comprehensive plan. I think the design guidelines were done a lot earlier than that, like 2005 maybe. And I think the intent of that document was to provide some guidance as to how to create architectural style in the downtown that was kind of consistent with the historic nature of our downtown. And I guess, I'm just guessing that I think maybe that document has something to do with it, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to know what other people think, but, I guess thinking about it, it kind of makes sense that you wouldn't want to just necessarily give somebody with a commercial property, what if they're putting up a fence that would sort of destroy some of the public realm somehow? So I was thinking of it that way, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of undecided on that aspect of it, but everything else makes sense to me, and I don't have any other comments really other than those.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself, because, we've got commercial properties on the edge of downtown that have fencing around them now, and there are several businesses I know of over there on 120 that are within our city limits that have chain link fences around them. So does that mean that they're grandfathered in and non-compliant, or, do we have an allowance for businesses like that? And tangentially, it says in here that fences should not be barbed wire, and I'm wondering, are we saying that barbed wire is not allowed across the top of a fence for security purposes? Does that mean that that's forbidden? Or is that falling under a different category and I missed it?
Let me go back to, so I think there's three things on the table. First is the 6.5 versus 7 foot. Chris did some research too, and what he has pulled from, looks like 15 different communities, it ranges between 6 and Oakdale allows up to 8 feet. In my experience, 6 feet is the standard. I thought we were higher by having 6.5 feet. 7 seems really tall for me. So Falcon Heights and St. Paul are the 7 foot. Oakdale and Mountains View have 8 feet. And then the rest of the kind of neighbors have 6 feet.
I have personal reasons for liking 6.5 feet.
Okay.
My goal to keep the deer out of my backyard,
Ah,
I used a 6 foot
and they
fence
jump
panel
right
with
over
a
it.
little gap at the bottom for the small critters, right?
They'll jump right over it.
6.5 feet, I think we've kept the deer out.
It's a different conversation,
The really big deer probably could get over that,
but they usually
but
don't.
they don't.
Yeah.
So then to your other comment about should we allow fencing in non-residential districts, I think we should. There are screening requirements for one, for those districts, and so we're just contradicting ourselves in this ordinance. There should maybe be some requirements as to how it's implemented, but I believe a fence on a residential lot would have the same, the commercial versus residential property would have the same front and side and rear yard requirements where you can't exceed certain feet. So that would be my recommendation, just to go ahead and open it up for commercial districts to have fencing. And then the barbed wire, I don't remember exactly where it's located in here, but it's understood, I think, is standard practice that barbed wire is just a prohibited material in most communities, unless you're in a position where you have some really high security situations where you want to allow it in certain circumstances.
Yeah, so section 11, subsection 3, under materials.
11A3, 11A,
Oh, sorry, 11A.
11A 3.1. Yeah, I mean, you got to go down about 4 levels. Prohibited materials, under the heading materials. And barbed wire is listed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me, especially, I mean,
I do wonder about that top.
Yeah, because just the way.
Usually if barbed wire is put on chain link, it's the 3 strands at the top
Yeah.
for higher security. Is that something we want to
Well-
specifically prohibit for some reason?
I would like to ask for a little clarification, and I apologize if I should know this. What is the city's procedure, and is there one for a variance for a fence? If we leave it prohibited, could a certain company ask for a variance?
Yeah, they could. So the fence, a variance of the zoning ordinance would be, fall under, it would be the same as variance practice or process as we had with the sign ordinance. The applicant has to prove some hardship and some rationale as to why the barbed wire would be required. And if they can prove that, then a variance process would work for them.
If someone came and said, I want higher security around my property, that's probably not sufficient for a variance.
I think that would be something hard to prove hardship over.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a hardship.
Yeah.
That, I think there would have to be some connection to the land use and its need for protection.
What about, and I'm just thinking about people that might want to have razor wire or barbed wire on top of their fence. So like an auto parts or an auto repair shop, you know, they say, well, we need to have this so that we can keep people out from stealing parts like catalytic converters and things like that when we're closed. Would that be sufficient if they didn't have a record of having that problem, but they want to try to keep that problem from occurring?
How is that any different than a towing company that has cameras in their facility? How is that any different?
Well, I think the same can apply for them too, you know.
Yeah.
I guess I'll ask this question. Since barbed wire at the top of a chain link fence is a fairly common thing, fairly common meaning when one wants more security, is there a reason we don't want it? We just don't want the look of it? Or why would we say that would be objectionable?
And I can
I'm curious.
I can understand not wanting the fence itself to be made out of barbed wire. So, you know, we don't want
Yes.
something that looks like it's defining somebody's back 40 acres.
Yeah,
But it's just the way it's written, it doesn't seem to give a lot of wiggle room.
that's right, because it's a prohibited material.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I would ask is that related to commercial properties different than residential? Because the question that I would ask is, as we look at the, residential, I think is, you know, let's put that one aside for the moment.
Yeah.
But is the question that you asked, when I think about commercial, and I think about some of our commercial properties that we have in town, some of those properties might justify having a legitimate fence for aesthetic purposes of the town. And legitimately, I think some of them probably would. On the same capacity, it's not every single one either. So I guess I would like to rethink what that picture looks like on a commercial basis. Are there some guidelines that we can add around the guidance to make that more beneficial to users and to improve the community in that capacity?
What I would suggest is that the prohibited materials as written are for residential.
Yeah.
Okay?
And put an exception in for barbed wire atop, you know, topping a chain link fence or something like that. And it maybe, I don't think we need to have a specific approval process to make that happen, but on a commercial property, maybe allow that on a commercial property if so desired by the property owner.
And anybody that wants a fence, regardless of if it's commercial or residential, you still have to go through the permitting process, so that you would
Right.
have some level of review over it
Yeah,
anyway.
at least
I
staff
was just
review.
thinking about commercial properties, I wasn't thinking, you know, wanting that for residential.
Right. I think we definitely don't want it for residential.
Agreed. I don't think we have any agriculture in town.
Yeah.
What a look that would be.
And if we have any billionaires move into town, they can build a solid wall fence around the property.
They can put whatever they want on the inside where you can't see it. It's interesting to think about going to other communities where every yard has a wall around it.
Yeah.
That's, I go to those situations and I think, wow, that's not at all the way we live, but,
Well, and the screwy thing is that, from my understanding, they have no lower crime rates because of that than those of us that don't have,
right?
you know, our places surrounded by walls and
Yeah.
moats.
Yeah, what about moats? Does that apply in?
Moats are not listed.
Landscaping issue.
Yeah, that's a landscaping issue. We're not talking landscaping except for
Well,
fence.
I'm calling mine a water garden, just because it
Yes.
happens to be a drawbridge over it.
For long-term feasibility of this change, is it wise to be less specific for security measures atop a fence? Whether it be razor, whether it be barb, whether it be electric, would it be wise just to say security measures on top of a fence must be, some standard, but not specifically call out barbed wire, just security measures in general at the top of a fence. That way we don't have to try and touch on every possible security measure. In my mind, you were talking about the old fences, and I remember how they used to set glasses in concrete.
Yeah.
But we don't want to spell out every specific security measure,
Right.
would be my thought.
Right.
Okay, I'm getting a little lost on the conversation. So what I think has been generally agreed upon is that the material prohibition that's in our current code, where you can't have chicken wire, barbed wire, plastic webbing or netting, snow fences, makeshift fences, flimsy materials, et cetera, that is, we're keeping that as it relates to residential property. Okay. When it comes to non-residential, anything goes. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I wonder,
Not anything, I don't think, but I'm wondering if it can be built into the permitting process too. I liked your comment about security measures,
To,
'cause that can be a lot of different things.
to me, we have to define what we permit and not permit.
Yeah, that's my concern too, is you have to put some kind of definition on it.
Yeah, because if we allow security measures, then you, I think, are saying an electric fence is appropriate. You want electric fences? Okay.
Or 3 spirals of razor wire,
Right, and I'm
know,
not even
I mean,
sure
it
what this
could
glass
be-
thing is.
like prison-like, if you just allow anything.
Right.
And I don't think we want to go that far. But
Something,
we also don't want staff to have to enforce something that they don't have the power to enforce.
something to consider, I'm just going to throw it out there. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Nobody has said anything about barbed wire being a problem. We've never had a barbed wire fence permit come through that I'm aware of, or anybody asking about it, at least in the year and a half that I've been
Very
here.
good point.
Yeah, so just going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming and asking, so leave it alone. It's okay.
I would feel comfortable leaving it up as a variance request issue.
Do you want me, while we were having the discussion, I pulled up the variance practical, the League of Minnesota Cities guidance on how to deal with variances, and I can just do a reminder right now? Okay.
Are you saying as it relates to commercial?
I think that's what he's saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were going to have a variance application for barbed wire, we would have to consider whether the property owner is proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner. That's one thing we have to prove. Okay, the reasonableness factor also means that the landowner wants to use the property in a reasonable manner, but can't do so under the rules of the ordinance. It does not mean that the land cannot be put to reasonable use whatsoever without the variance. For example, if the variance application is for a building too close to a lot line or does not meet the required setback, the focus of the first factor is whether the request to place a building there is reasonable. So if you have enough land to put your building anywhere on the lot, but you just want it where you want it, that's not reasonable.
I think it would be a very tough sell to get a variance for barbed wire if it's not a permitted material. I can't think of an argument that would win in that regard.
We could put something in there that says conditionally, it's like I don't know, this is something that I've never seen if it's happened before.
I think I lean toward your comment about if it's not broke, don't fix it. Because if we don't have people asking for this, and I honestly can't tell you I've seen a barbed wire fence unless it's some ancient thing in the woods
Right.
someplace.
About as you come off of 694 onto Century Avenue, which sits right on the borderline between Maplewood, I think it's Maplewood right there in that community, and that called Park District, before you hit Joy Road, on the right-hand side of the road. If you watch along the right-hand side, you coming up along, I can guarantee you there's barbed wire throughout that entire facility. I don't think that's intentional. I don't think that was done by any purpose, but it's in that area on the right-hand side.
On which quadrant?
So north of Silver Lake, north of Joy Street, before you hit 694, on the west side of 120.
Do you know what the business is or the use?
It's
No, it's park.
it's park.
What's park?
It's the Ramsey County Open Space.
So the reason I mention that is so, and I bring that up because if that is the case, it could be used in some of those more community rec centers that are, less, less use of individuals. It could be out there for a while. I guess my question is how is that impacted, and would we be doing anything to impact any of those facilities?
I really can't,
Again, it's a question. It's,
yeah, I can't imagine where it's going to be an issue. I mean, while I tend toward, let's not regulate something if it doesn't matter. And if we aren't going to enforce it, why regulate it? Though that's sort of a good principle. In this case, I think that there's not a need to change it, so why should we change it? I'm kind of leaning that direction. And if there's an old, 60, 70, 80-year-old barbed wire fence buried in the woods someplace, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about somebody building something new, so.
Another factor to consider, if somebody does want a barbed wire fence and they have a reasonableness of wanting it, we could have them, or direct them down the path instead of a variance. Maybe they apply for an ordinance amendment, and then we can bring it back for discussion.
There's good justification. Yeah.
Right? Similar to what we did with the sign with the VFW, the Legion.
And I'm sorry, I didn't want to introduce a stumbling block here, I just wanted to make
No.
sure that it was considered.
Absolutely. No problem there. I have a question about under, let's see, fences and walls, 11A, 1, 2, obtaining a fence permit. Does every fence require a permit? The way it's written, it would.
Yes, it does.
Any fence of any kind. Does that include if somebody's putting up some sort of temporary fence? I'm not saying that would be a bad thing, I'm just saying,
But when you
like
say
a
we-
construction fence, for
I think we
instance.
prohibit that.
In there. That's written out somewhere here.
Yeah, in the proposed ordinance language on page 5, near the top of the page, temporary and snow fences are allowed without a permit.
Okay,
This is new language.
okay.
And I'm sorry, this is something that I had not looked in the ordinance for, it just occurred to me. Do we have anything in here about replacing an existing fence, whether it needs to be permitted under all circumstances, or if it's simply a replacement, exact replacement of what's existing?
Replacement or repair?
It's on, okay. All right.
I would think replacement or repair would be much like
Like I
putting
say, I'm sorry I
new
hadn't
finishes
thought
in your
about
house.
Yeah.
I would think that wouldn't require a permit.
I don't think it's spelled out, but I believe most people pull a permit if they're going to replace their fence.
And we do state all fences must be kept in good repair and appearance on both sides, blah, blah, blah. So there shall not be in a condition of disrepair.
doesn't that fall under the farm fence aspect?
The farm fence? Oh,
I guess I'm just thinking, if somebody wants to replace their fence with more modern, well, not even more modern material, just, basically reduplicate the fence that they've got. Should they have to go ahead and get a permit to do it if it's, more or less the same as what they have already? And would there be a reason that we would come to them and say, well, we're sorry, we approved this fence 25 years ago, but now that you want to replace it, we're not going to approve it?
It's still a level of construction that I feel like you'd want
Yeah.
somebody aware of. You're going to be drilling in the ground, you're going to be digging, and it seems like it would be a good idea to have a permit for that. even if it's just replacing an existing one, I would think, but.
I think it's pretty common practice for most cities to require a fence permit if you're doing the whole fence. If you're just gonna do a panel, maybe not require the fence permit, so just for some repair might be okay.
Yeah, well, I think a panel or two would definitely fall into the repair.
But I don't think that's spelled out yet.
Well, again, maybe I'm trying to overcomplicate something.
Well, and I would think if, just from a practical standpoint, let's say I have a 4-foot chain link fence and it's just ancient and broken in several places, and I decide I want to replace it and I want to put another 4-foot chain link fence in its place, but a nice new clean one. To me, that seems like it's entirely a repair scope and not a new fence scope, and that it wouldn't be, and a permit wouldn't be required to do that, in my mind. If it's in exactly the same place of
They're not
similar
redrilling the
materials.
holes. That would be, like, the holes, right? They're not redoing the posts or anything.
I think that this point should be clarified because I think our practice now, without the guidance, is to require permits.
Okay,
So I don't think we have a preference one way or the other as staff goes. But we should, if we're gonna clean up the ordinance, we should decide whether we're
Yeah.
gonna require it.
I will point out my date might be wrong, but I believe 2013, I had a car go through my fence. And when I repaired it, I did reach out to the city. They did not make me get a permit.
yeah.
But that's, 10, 11 years old at the time.
One thing that would be favorable about getting a permit is if the fence was installed incorrectly in the first place, then, or in the wrong spot,
Right,
it gives you a chance to look at it and correct.
yeah,
And they're not too expensive.
yeah, I
I
would
think
think.
it's
that
$65.
It's not a revenue generator,
No,
so.
but again,
the practicality of a permit is staff gets a chance to look at it and say,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, you're intending to do what?
Correct.
And when something is questionable.
and it also gives the applicant the knowledge of also they have to call Digger's Hotline and just some of the practical matters of what
Right.
you need to do a fence.
And there's a document then of where it should actually be
Right,
Right.
put.
Right.
And,
yep.
yeah.
Because who's to say that that's a good point. If you don't have that fence permit approval on file
Yeah.
and you suddenly have a new fence going up and you don't have a record of the old fence, it looks like they did something without.
So I saw that in your modifications, you struck the owner being responsible for obtaining a permit and locating property lines. Is the property line location something that is removed, or is it moved to a different place?
That's moved to, if you go to the section 2 of the ordinance changes, where at the top of it says fences and walls, under location, it's the second one down. I'm looking on page 4. It's a little confusing how I labeled these things.
Oh, yeah, properly locating all property lines before construction of any fence. Okay,
You talking on the bottom?
it's there. It got removed from one place, relocated to another place, basically. That's what I was trying to find.
Oh, I see. I see where it got removed. Yeah, it went down
Got removed from the main item.
from the definition.
And went down into the sub-item.
Yeah.
And I think I have mentioned this in the past, but tangentially to this, can the city update the list of the surveyors that they recommend in the area? Because when I had my property surveyed a year ago, the list that they gave me, every single one of them was no longer in business.
I didn't know that we did that. I didn't think that,
Last year, when I was looking for a surveyor, I asked if they had a list of approved or recommended surveyors, and they handed me one.
Did you
So-
find a surveyor?
Well, yes, but
Okay.
it turned out to be the guy that's in charge of the survey for Anoka County. He does the sideline.
Really?
And I thought, well, okay, he's not on my list, but if he's the county surveyor.
There you go.
He should know what he's doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to check into that because I didn't know that we did that. And I think that most places don't because it demonstrates partiality to some
Yeah.
surveyors over the other.
Well, it was a list of like 15 different surveyors, so I think.
Right.
But still, like I said, I went through all of them, and like a third of the phone numbers were dead.
Hmm.
And the ones that had websites were dead. So, anyway, like I said, it was kind of, it was a nice bit of help, but a worthless exercise. I think though it would be handy at least to refer people to how to find a surveyor. Some,
I like the fact that there's language in here about connecting to a neighbor.
That would be Chris's addition.
Yeah.
Version 5 on page 12. Is that where you're at, Patrick?
11 of 13, there's, I think is where I was seeing it.
You're one above me. Got it. Yeah, I was in the same section. Sorry, one, yeah. Yep, got it. Thank you.
So you're proposing to eliminate section 3 entirely? Am I reading that right?
What is section 3 related to?
Well, it's.
Oh, I see it, I see it.
Down at the, we're pretty close to the end here, I think.
I believe I moved that. Let me see, why did I do that?
And the reference to the play space per pupil in a daycare and nursery references a different section where we define what those fences should be, so that all makes sense.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I figured out what happened with that first one. So the elimination, that language is listed in a place in the ordinance that's completely not related to fences. So I'm just moving it to the fence regulations as opposed to this non-encroachment section of the code. And then your question about daycare fences, what was that?
Yeah, that's the next one down is references a other section, so that you're basically just pointing to
Correct.
the regulation,
Yep.
fence regulation.
I think the rest of those are basically the same. Cross-references can be dangerous in the event that you do them in the ordinance, but it's helpful to have when it's all current.
No reason to write it twice. Just makes it more difficult and longer.
I do have one other thing on the height of the fence. I just happen to remember, when I was in Texas, I was on the zoning board of adjustments for Bryan, Texas, and we had somebody come to us one time about a height restriction on their fence because the drop in the property was such that were they to erect the maximum fence, the property next to it was still almost at the top of the fence. And I'm just wondering, I can't think of any situations here, but we're not exactly tabletop flat either. Would it make any sense to put some sort of a, not proviso per se, but, say it's, no more than 6 or 7 feet past the highest point of the property along the fence line or something like that? So that if somebody had that situation, they could erect a taller fence if it was a man keeping the neighbor out of their property?
Would
I
that
don't know if
be,
that makes any sense,
it
but
makes sense, but would that be a case of it's never come up, so why, yeah,
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
request a variance?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very rare, but there
I-
are cases where you have.
Feel I should say something. Because if the 120 project goes through like they're talking, I will be requesting a variance for that same reason for my property. I have I'll say 6-foot drop from 120 to where my fence is currently. If they move 120 closer to my fence, I would request a variance for that height difference. I don't know if it would be granted or not, but to me, where it would come up, for me and at least one other neighbor, would be with the 120 difference.
I guess so I guess thinking about the fence and thinking about what you just brought up, I mean, there's properties that are along 36 that could fall into that same category. Obviously, there's some things they can or can't do in that capacity. Is there anything of, from a highway perspective that can be used from a height perspective, whether it be noise, et cetera? Could be noise, could be keeping the kids in, it could be a variety of reasons, but is there any reason behind that process as we think about the fences? Because that will impact a few properties along 120 when that occurs. And I don't believe that that's going to fall within the category of a temporary fence, because that's a 6-month basis, and that project's going to run much longer.
Well, and you're talking about a permanent situation.
Yeah, it would be permanent.
My thought is it would fall under the hardship or, variance, so I wasn't truly concerned about it. I don't know that's something we need to address. But that is my current plan going forward, is if they're moving the road that much closer to my house for sound, and that, I personally feel with the variance process, that would be a reasonable hardship, that I don't need to move my fence and lose, 2 to 3 feet of my yard. I would like to keep the fence where it is, make it higher. I think that's a fair request, whether granted or not, to go to the city for. I don't know that we would need to put anything in the regulations for a situation like that.
In that situation, I would think it could be considered a hardship because it's being imposed upon
Right.
the property owner
Yeah.
outside of their control, kind of a thing.
And just going back to what started the discussion about this, it does say in section 6, height of screening shall be measured from natural or approved grade. Berms and retaining walls shall not be used to increase grade relative to screening height. So like Cameron, in your example, it would be measured from the yard, not the berm probably, but yeah, that's your example seems like kind of a different, because it's something imposed on your property rather than just the natural topography of the.
And I think to try and come up with a ordinance language that addresses every one of those variables is probably impossible.
Yeah.
So I think to leave it up to the permitting process and possibly the variance process is not a bad avenue.
And I bring these up just because I want to make sure that we don't write them into code so hard that it's impossible to, or almost impossible to, find loopholes when they are necessary. Not that I want to generate loopholes that anyone can take advantage of.
I'm down to the end, page 13. I have a question about pools and spas. And Brandy, this is a question sort of for you. Isn't there state statute about pools for safety?
I don't know. I can investigate that.
Could you check into that? Because I thought there was a state statute that said something about, for like child safety and that kind of
Yeah.
a thing, that you have to have a certain size, height fence to prevent children from getting in there.
I think we already do have that language in the code, but I don't know. So currently it says a structure or safety fence of at least 4 feet in height shall completely enclose the pool.
Right, but what I was wondering, the reason I was asking was if there's a state statute, we should match it. That makes
sense.
That was the only reason I was asking, because I don't know that there is, but I just know, I've heard that so many times in different ways. I don't know where that rule comes from. If it's always localized or if there's a broader state requirement.
Okay, I think I found it in Minnesota Administrative Rules.
5 feet?
Yep, you found it too.
Good job.
Unless it was built before 1995. Then it exists as 4 foot.
So do we reference the state statute or do we just make it match, make the language match?
I think we should make the language match.
Yeah, okay. How about that?
Considering how difficult it can be for the for the average person to find state statutes that's not used to working with them regularly.
That's good. I'm impressed. Way to go, Google. Unless you didn't use Google.
That's exactly right.
That Google guy, he's pretty good.
I'm telling you.
Woodbury also has 4 feet in height.
They do.
So they're
Interesting.
lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. All you need is one nasty accident and
I have to think there's a few more pools in Woodbury than we have in town.
does anyone else have comments, questions?
So, down at the bottom under section 7, verse 8, it kind of talks about the automotive service stations. It talks about 90% shall be opaque. Can you talk to that concept? Because I think of it about an automotive service station. Opaque is not what I think of as far as a service station for an automotive repair center. That seems contrary, because they're trying to keep vehicles out, trying to keep people from looking in, trying to, protect the premises. I guess I have to inquire, why did we go with 90% opaque, and what's the purpose behind that? Again, I just have to ask.
That's talking about if it abuts a residential use.
Yeah, it's screening to residential districts.
So I've got a commercial automotive service center, like the one that sits at 120, just as an example.
Yep,
Goes against property, and it's supposed to be 90% opaque.
yep, to the residential property. Screening the stuff, the cars and stuff that are sitting in the parking lot.
Opaque means it's visible, I
No.
can see through it.
No, it's
No,
solid.
opaque is solid.
I had to Google it too just now.
The only reason I know is because of tights.
Yeah,
Right.
Maybe we should change the word opaque to something that's a little more common usage.
Opaque's pretty common in zoning.
it's pretty common. Pretty common unless you don't use it very often.
I will give you that, I just haven't used that very often, respectfully, so again, just had to ask.
That's okay.
I guess
That's okay.
That does beg the question of what grade level are we writing this to?
Well, you could follow the rules of what is it, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times that use the 6th grade reading level as their guide. Sometimes I read that stuff and I go, this is 6th grade? Really?
I strive to make it,
Smarter than a first grader kind of?
well, to have fewer, to say it as simply as possible.
Yeah.
Is a goal of mine.
That's a good goal. I think it's okay.
I'm not sure I used that word in 6th grade, just for frame of
Yeah, right.
I may have used it, but I probably didn't use it correctly.
Yep. So is there still, are there still some pieces related on the commercial side that we still have to think about as we were talking earlier, Brandy?
In terms of materials,
Yes.
I think that makes sense. We should have that discussion because right now I don't have any direction as to what materials are appropriate. I could do research and bring back some suggestions at the next meeting. Okay.
That's a good idea.
If there's anything else that jumps out of you in that process, thinking about some of those commercial properties, whether it's height, size that comes across as you're going through those, maybe bring those along with and see if there's any variations on that commercial side that you see that's different.
For height specifically?
Correct. Again, I don't think there would be, but
Because I'm
it,
thinking of at least one property over there, it's a cement driveway place, it's next to the Burger King, I'm sure their fence is higher than 6 feet high. Or, yeah, I think it's higher than
Yeah.
7, I think it's closer to an 8-foot fence.
I would have to look, but yeah, I understand, I know where you're coming from.
Well, that would be a wall, right? Are you saying a concrete wall?
No, it's.
Oh, it's a
chain-
fence for a concrete company, okay.
No, they do concrete driveways, is what they advertise on the side of
Oh.
the building. That's what I'm talking about. I just can't think of what their name is.
Yeah, I know where you're talking too, and I can't tell you.
It's probably predates our ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the building does, although I swear I think that company is relatively new, or maybe it's just that they put up, it may just have put up a new sign that I've noticed. I know for a while there was a food truck that was parked there some days during the week.
Is there any reason we would want to consider a taller fence than 6.5 feet as being acceptable in a commercial setting?
In a commercial
I mean,
setting, I can see it.
If they are shielding from view pallets that they're storing.
And they can certainly stack them higher than 8 feet, so not sure you gain a lot that way.
So perhaps screening.
Okay.
Screening, visual screening is very difficult to manage depending on the circumstance. I mean, when you were talking about various grades of adjacent properties, how do you establish a suitable screen that's 6.5 feet high or something along those lines? And the property next to you, the residential property next to you is 8 feet taller than where the fence is, and, you know, you start getting into those sorts of situations, and visual screening becomes very hard to measure. So, I mean, to establish the goal with the ordinance and say, this is what we're trying to do, I think at least gives staff then the opportunity to say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't really work.
So maybe define an intent for the fence regs?
Well, if we're talking about visual screening, to maybe state that the intent is to block the view from the residential property to the commercial property. That's the intent. And then, you know, you at least have that to look at then from a permitting standpoint and say, we are either achieving it or not achieving it. Then it gives the property owner an opportunity to also say, well, wait a minute. You said the intent is to screen, but you also tell me I can only put up a 6.5 foot high fence. So tell me what you want.
Correct.
Right.
Then that's where a variance makes sense, because you've got the hardship situation.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good point.
You can't do both, so decide what the priority is. And like I say, you can't write all that into here, but you could put an intent statement in, just in a really generic way in the first part. Maybe it's the first thing under the fences and walls, or the second thing, or something, somewhere near the beginning of. I don't know where it best fits.
Well, I can figure that out for us.
Somewhere in section 2.
Yeah.
That's where it goes.
Yep, I agree with that.
You might run it past the city attorney possibly.
Yeah.
And see if they have any suggestion. Where is the legally most responsible area to say this?
Well, where visual screening is required, the intent is that the commercial property will screen views from adjacent residential properties. That's essentially what you want it to say in some form. And so then at least you've got that in there.
Okay. Well, I think I've got some good direction on revisions and research.
Are there any other fence variations that we have not accounted for in this group? I know we cover some of the temporary pieces. Are there any other fence versions out there that or use cases for fences that we have not accounted for in this grouping? Again, just have to ask.
Something that we've never thought about.
Just on
I
this,
got something today that I've never thought about.
Sure.
Kind of, somebody submitted a fence permit for, it's hard to describe. Maybe I can find it quick and show you.
I'm anticipating that we're not, as you think about fences, you're not talking about underground dog fences. That's a different version. But I'm just trying to think of, are there other fences that we're not taking into account when we think about what we have?
I don't know how to quickly find this, but I'll try to describe it. Somebody submitted a fence permit and it was intended to be a screen. So imagine like a fence panel, like a privacy panel, and on the bottom of it was a planter attached to it. And it would just kind of hang out in the yard to screen like the patio from the neighbors. Is that a fence? My interpretation was that's not a fence because it's not enclosing anything. Right, correct. So I said, just, you don't need a permit for that, just try to keep it no taller than 6.5 feet.
Would that be considered in the same family as like a trellis?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. We have a similar screen from our neighbors, but it's plants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea of creating a little bit of privacy around the patio, that kind of a thing.
So that made me look at our fence ordinance today with different eyes than I did when I was working on this. And so I think maybe our definition of fence should be adjusted, maybe?
Well, it's boundary, what is it? How did you state it?
It says any partition, structure, wall, or gate erected as a divider, marker, barrier, or enclosure. So I think the divider is what threw me. Like, that is kind of a divider, but it's not enclosing anything.
I would actually think it's more of a barrier, right, in that circumstance that you're talking about, because you're trying to keep somebody seeing into your property.
I think you could have argued that that was a permittable fence. You could, based on this definition, you could have argued it either way.
Well, it's not clear.
Where do you draw the line?
Right.
What is a fence and not a fence? Or barrier, or, you know, you could make it out of many different materials. I think the definition is pretty clear, but as you have found out, there could be a variable that makes you question, well, I wonder. That's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, another one that I'm thinking of came up in another community that I worked for where it's just a decorative thing, like at the corner. I don't want to make people pull permits for that. You know,
Grandma has one of those.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's a what?
some kind of decoration that is made out of fencing materials, like a,
Okay.
but it's just,
Like on the corner of your property line, you might
Yeah.
put some plants and
Yeah.
an old wrought iron
Thing.
circular thing that
Yep.
went on a wagon wheel. I mean,
Yeah.
again,
Yep.
legitimately.
we had a wagon wheel in the corner growing up.
I know where there's a couple of those.
Yeah.
Can't be within that vision triangle, though. That's very clear here.
Yeah, that's good.
It's on the other side.
Your thought crossed my mind, 'cause that's right where I was at.
Triangle.
Now, there, I am kind of wondering here, rereading this, are we saying in here that hedges are falling under the same guidelines? Because we mentioned hedges in the definition of fences and walls, but I am not, you know, it's like, could you have a 10-foot tall hedge if you trained it that way?
Yes,
Yes, you could.
very well done.
So,
Seen some.
But is a hedge a fence and doesn't need to be permitted?
And if it doesn't, does it need to be? in
Does it
the
need to be
list?
removed from the list?
Yeah, I think we should take that out.
Yeah, I would agree. Because landscaping is a different thing.
Yeah.
And what about walls,
I think a wall is a fence.
even if it's made out of
Yeah, I mean, you can build it,
bricks?
you can build a fence, in my mind, a fence or wall out of many different materials. You could build them out of stone, out of brick, out of wood, out of, metal. I think all of those fall in the fences and walls category that should be a part of this ordinance. But I think the hedges is a different thing. That's a very good
Suspect they're
catch.
in there simply because they could be used to demarc property lines.
They could.
I think you're right. I think it falls under landscaping rather than,
It's a different thing.
yeah.
That should come out.
If that's the case, what about the wall around our Public Works building? That's more than 6.5 feet tall? I think it's more than 6.5.
It is. It is, yeah.
I'll make a note of that and do some research.
With the exception of city property.
Well, I wonder about, yeah.
Commercial
that-
property.
And that is,
Yeah.
Legit.
that is the screening question, which is really, there's two reasons that it's there, screening and security.
Right.
So the question then
That's we should
is,
lower it.
I think I keep it.
are there conditions where a wall should be treated differently from a fence? Such as that. Is that but there are other places where we call for screening and a fence is allowable for screening. Is a 6.5-foot high fence enough for screening? In most cases, yes. But, I mean, Liz was mentioning, if somebody stacks pallets or something and you want it to be screened from the neighbors, it could be a really tall pile of pallets. So, so you wouldn't want a fence that's 20 feet high.
Well, but perhaps, yeah, I think that's another enforcement issue. If it's pallets, you just don't get
Yeah.
to stack them that
Right,
high.
right.
I have gotten confused at this point. Are we saying that we're going for a 6-foot or a 7-foot maximum fence?
It's 6.5 right now.
Right.
And that's kind of where we
What
were
talking-
leaving it.
Oh, we're keeping it at that? Okay.
That's
That's what I understood,
where we're leaving it.
yeah.
Okay.
With the review and research of what's going on with commercial fences or non-residential fences, to see what the height is like in situations of screening.
Yeah, because the conditions, I mean, think about some of the things, over into Oakdale and look at what they put around the yard of the Fleet Farm, for instance. Where they have, tall racks and things like that, and there's screening there, and it's definitely taller than 6.5 feet, and it would have to be. So is there, that's what gets complicated when you start injecting commercial properties into this, is what kind of screening do you require? Do we need something that, maybe the exception that you're putting in there, the intent statement that we were talking about, specifically talks to commercial properties adjacent to residential when screening is required, and maybe the 6.5-foot rule doesn't make sense in some cases when visual screening is the intent.
Well, certainly, any of the lumberyard type of operations are gonna need more than that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we have any lumberyards that are within North St. Paul. I don't think we do. But we're certainly surrounded by them.
I like the idea of the intent statement, and I think instead of writing a whole bunch more ordinance to try and think of every variable that a commercial property might have, it would be better to have the intent, the permit required, and it gives the staff the tools
Yeah.
to talk through with the property owner and say, here's what is expected.
That seems, oops. that
I
seems
think that's a
good.
good way to approach it. Because it's leaving a lot of flexibility then, even for the property owner and for the staff, to interact and say, okay, here's what we are expecting you to do. This is what the intent says. Now let's figure out how best to do that for you.
Right. I like it.
And I think that accommodates the question about the city building. Because there was a very specific intent for what they wanted there. I mean, that, you could almost argue that that's part of the building. Maybe.
Maybe,
Sort of.
yeah.
If there's racking and stuff on the other side of it, then,
I guess I'm gonna go back to the 6.5 fence thing real quick. I'm just, because at the time that I spent working down at Menards, we didn't sell 6.5 foot fencing.
Mhm.
It was usually
was
either
6 or 8.
Or 7.
6 or 7?
6, 7, or 8.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, should we go ahead and just knock it up an extra 6 inches and say the maximum 7?
You could. You could say that's the maximum.
Yeah.
You don't have to put up a 7-foot fence. You could put up a 6-foot or a 4-foot fence, or a 5-foot fence. So 7 max, I think that's okay. Anybody have a problem with that?
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
To me.
Yeah. I won't be able to see over it.
It's all good.
Yeah, we don't have very many people that are over 7'5". And
No.
No.
Although I did run into one guy at the Quick Trip the other day, I think might have been.
It's like, you look up.
I'm past my fence climbing age.
Good discussion, though. Good items came up. Anything else?
No, not for me.
Looking at Google Maps, so if I think about areas to review from a commercial basis, as we were talking about, you've got the whole section between 7th and Shifsky, easy for me to say. You're coming up through that whole downtown corridor. You've got Target on the north side, right? And then you've got up by 120. Those are literally your 3 big corridors to look at on what we currently have and what we have to evaluate. As I was just doing a quick commercial property, just looking to see what might be there, were the 3 major areas that I saw. Again, just thinking about it, Brandy, from a commercial basis. Because there are some variations in those categories too.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We have a lot of properties that just don't have a lot of land for fencing, like in the downtown. We have had requests for some kind of fence at one point in time in the downtown, and we had to tell them no because of the rule.
Brandy, I would really like your input. This whole fence ordinance, by what we said earlier, was primarily directed at residential. There's been some wonderful conversations and stuff brought up about commercial. For you and staff, is trying to combine commercial fencing or walls and residential fencing and walls going to be better or worse than having 2 separate sections? What's better for staff?
I think it's going to be okay because it's all going to be under the heading fence regulations. So we'll just define, here's what non-residential fences have to live under, here's what residential fences can live under. I think it's actually fairly simple.
Okay.
And yeah, as long as you've got commercial versus non-residential versus residential clearly delineated.
I think for the average Joe or Jane public, they're gonna look for the heading of fencing
Right.
rather than they're gonna
Yeah.
look for residential versus commercial.
A lot of people don't look at the ordinance. They come in and talk to Chris, and he hands them his handout.
Good.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's got some pretty informative, just informational flyers about various projects that are zoning related. So he's done good work there.
Okay, anything else? If not, we're going to move on.
So just to close this up, I'll revise, bring research. So we'll talk about fencing next month. And then I also started home occupation permits. So we get to talk about that too.
That'll be good.
Home occupation permits.
So as you're talking about commercial respect, looking on the southwest side where the golf course is, just take a look on the fencing side associated with those golf courses, because sometimes the outer lengths of those golf courses are not chain link, just on a sidebar. Some of those are barbed wire from the older days. That's not uncommon.
Are you talking about Goodrich? Is that a golf course?
Yep.
Okay.
So again, just as a, just as we talk about that
Mm-hmm.
commercial area, just so we know what we could run in contact with.
Yeah. The only other thing I thought of was unusual situations like ball fields. You know,
Oh.
but that has to be regulated separately. I mean, a fence around a ball field, like behind a home plate,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing, that's a different deal.
Right.
So,
You know, with you bringing up home occupation, it does bring up something completely disassociated with that, but it's associated in my own mind. Do we have anything in zoning, or does it fall under legal, as far as squatters in the city? Not that we have a problem with it that I'm aware of, but it's something I'm reading more and more about people occupying property that they don't own in other parts of the country. And so I'm just wondering whether that's something that we would address in code, or whether that's a legal thing, or whether that falls under state.
I'm unfamiliar with that. I think that it's not a zoning issue, but it's just Googling it quick. It looks like it might be something related to. I'm not sure how to answer that. Let me get back to you.
All right.
all right, next. Move on to reports. Commissioner Wise, can we start with you? Have anything?
I have nothing to report tonight, no.
Right. Commissioner Rothi?
Yep, so we had the outing at the community venues at the Police Works, or not the Police Works, the Police and Fire one day, and then we were at the City Hall the other day, and both of those events I thought they did a great job of, one, communication, two, opening up their facilities, just being really open to anybody who was there, to be able to walk through. It was, one, it was quite informative. They actually put some good work into it. Fire department did a great job. Police department, of course, they were going to make it entertaining, which it was, and uneventfully. But I thought they did a really good job of it. And so kudos to the crew, and thanks for opening that up for the team members as well. That's all I got.
Good. Commissioner Gadboy?
I don't have anything.
Nothing. Start on the other end. Jason, do you have?
I have two things. One, I would like to thank you all. This commission, it put so much thought and so much conversation into these, that once it becomes before the city council, we have it easy because you are doing such the heavy lifting and all the hard work. And none of this would be possible without Brandy and her support staff. So I really want to thank you all. It does make, when these issues come before us, it's smooth because of all the work you guys are doing. So I want to say thank you. And also I want to remind anyone listening and hear that we do have a special workshop meeting coming up on the 14th at 4 p.m. One of the topics will be the city council, or the community center. So I encourage anyone who has interest to attend, 4 p.m. on Thursday.
Is that city council conversation taking place, or is that separate from city council on the community center?
It's a council workshop.
It's a city council workshop on the community center.
Got it.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, is it like evening time like our meetings normally are?
4 PM.
Perfecto.
That was the 14th, you said?
Yep.
Next week on Thursday.
I don't know that the room it's going to be in has been announced yet, whether it's in one of the conference rooms or here.
Okay, Commissioner Kane Burback,
Nothing from me.
nothing for you. Commissioner Muick?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. I would mention, and I can't find the date, but I would mention Cleanup Day. It's in May. Brandy, do you know when that is?
I know it is the Saturday following fish opening. Does anybody know when that is? Let me look at my calendar.
Typically Mother's Day weekend.
I can't find.
I remember it was a
Yeah,
big deal
it's-
that it
Yeah,
was.
right, it is typically Mother's Day.
It's typically Mother's Day.
Is it really?
Yeah,
It
it
is.
usually is.
Yeah, my
Fishing
brother-in-law
opener
owns
is
a
almost
fishing rod
always that
company. My
weekend.
mother-in-law loves Mother's Day.
There was a big discussion about the date. We can't conflict with fish opening.
Yeah.
We didn't
Right.
worry about Mother's Day.
So maybe the week after. Okay, so that would be like third weekend, second or third weekend? I can't find it on the
I have it on my calendar. It looks like it's May 11th.
May 11th, okay. All right, well, cleanup day is always a good thing for people to participate in. The other thing is the citywide garage sale, which is Thursday, the 2nd of May through the 4th. So, register your address and pay $10 registration fee, and then you get yard signs and other fun things. I have not participated in that except to shop from time to time, but
I usually walk down the street and grab something.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing,
I don't like pricing things.
yeah. The only other thing that just came to mind, because I'm thinking garage sale, that means that people are selling stuff and getting rid of things. And I don't know if anybody has ever explored the Buy Nothing group,
Yes, I love
but it's tremendous. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we've
you can
exchanged
fix it,
things
yes.
from time to time.
The stuff they don't want.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
It's a great.
It's
Or whatever. They're great.
fantastic.
Okay.
We found a
I
four-wheeler
love
for my
when
son
people
on it.
just come and pick up my stuff.
They didn't want it.
We access it
My husband,
all the time, going both ways.
I can install a new battery.
Fabulous.
And the fact that you can borrow things and return them is
Or you can
really
just ask
very
for
fun.
information.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, look it up if you're so inclined. That is all that I have. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Commissioner Rothi, a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Muick. All in favor, say aye.
I.
We are adjourned.